everybody, my name is Nicola Yardy. I am a creative portrait photographer from Toronto, Ontario. I do a lot of people portraits, musician portraits, fashion portraits, and I also do dog portraits as well. So today I'm just going to be doing this video to show you guys how I created this picture and this picture. It's really simple. All it is creative window light. I'm using direct and indirect window light to light these. The other thing that I'm using for it is a little crystal, this guy right here. These give off the cutest little rainbows. They're so helpful to create interesting photos, and not only can you use them to create rainbows, but you can actually put them in front of your lens to create interesting scenes and reflections as well. The other thing that I am using for this video, I'm using my Canon 5D Mark III to take the photos. When we go through it, I'll put the settings that I use on there as well. And I also used basically like a trigger for my camera that's corded, so it would be easier. Normally, if I would do a tutorial video, I would probably use a model and not be the portrait subject of it as well, but since this is COVID-19, obviously I can't have a model in the house, so I will introduce you to my stand-in model. This is my model. I use her to help me focus on the right spot in portraits and get my lighting right. They're so helpful. It took me 10 years of photography to finally buy one of these, and I'll never go back. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this video. First we'll start with me shooting the pictures, and then at the end of the video we'll go into my editing process. Alright. So, video time. Alright, so this is the front entranceway to my house. Super cute. I love the way that the light comes in. It's shining perfectly where I'm gonna sit, and as you can see, I have this tiny little window, small light source. So here I am. I'm going to hang up my crystals into the direct lighting of the window so that they shine the beautiful rainbows. It'll be perfect because while the crystals are in the direct lighting, I will be sitting in the indirect lighting, putting a soft light on my face. As you can see, the light, it's right on top of my chair. It'll be shining right on my face. I definitely timed it to be this time of day. So I set up my girl on where I think that my head will about be, so I can angle my camera nicely with my tripod. I'm just putting up my settings. I'm gonna put them on the screen right now so you guys can see what I did. I used f5.6 because I wanted my entire face to be in focus, but I wanted the background to be slightly soft, and I used daylight white balance because I wanted the rainbows from the prisms to be true to color. As you can see, I'm tilting up my head. I'm trying to get the prism to shine into my eye. You can tell when that happens when the light from the prism is like glaring into your eyes. I'm just trying to dye different poses, try different angles. You never want to be straight onto the camera. You want to create interesting angles by placing maybe a shoulder in front, not being so square to the camera. You want to be able to make an interesting emotion and angle with your own body or your model's body. Don't be afraid to try things that you might think look bad or look weird, because it's all digital. It's not like you're wasting film. Take as many shots as you want, especially if you're doing a self-portrait, because it's hard to tell what you're actually doing when you're not behind the camera. Always check your photos every once in a while to see how they look. You don't have to do it every shot. Take like 5-10 shots, then go check and see how you like it. So for image 2, I really like the leading line that the direct lighting through this window makes. I'm gonna hang up my prisms, and all the lines are gonna go right into where I'm gonna be sitting. I'm gonna put up my settings right now. I used F9 for this one because I wanted everything to be in focus, even the texture on the wall. And I also wanted to underexpose the shot a bit so that the highlights of the direct lighting of the window wouldn't be pure white or overexposed. I wanted to keep them in a good zone for editing. When I was posing, I realized how cool it would look if the light was going right into my back, so I turned to my camera and made sure that I was not too square, had my shoulder closest to the camera, and that is the final pose that I decided on. Okay, so this is the image that I'm deciding to edit today. I've already finished one and I really like the way it looks, so I'm going to try to edit this one in the same way from the ground up so you can see my editing process. So right now I'm in camera raw. I always shoot in raw. It's very important to do that. It lets you have the ability to take back any detail in post-processing. So if you can see that the shadows are a bit dark, if I take up my shadows, you can regain so much detail by shooting in raw. You won't lose any quality. It's absolutely fantastic. Definitely highly recommend shooting in raw if you're capable of doing that on your camera. You can actually, in new phones, you can shoot in raw as well, which is pretty crazy. So the first thing I'm gonna do is lighten up my shadows a bit. I really like showing detail on the blacks. I think it's super important to not lose detail there. And so I'm gonna open that image right into Photoshop. So now we are in Photoshop. Now we can start editing right away. So I'll show you the image that I finished editing already. I like the tones in this. It has like a greeny tone in the background. I kept the reds in my cheeks and in my nose. I brightened up the highlights and I just kind of gave my skin a sickly look. I'm into it. So I'm gonna do the same thing to this one. The first thing I'm going to start with on this image is actually bringing up the highlights like you saw in the last photo. My favorite thing about taking pictures with a small light source is you get these crazy, let me put on my pointer tool. You get these crazy highlights that are so small. So there's one on my nose as well, and the ones on my forehead and above my eye. They kind of make you look sick because I was a little sweaty taking this, to be real, but using a small light source picks up on highlights like this. I absolutely adore this look and I always enhance it in almost all my photographs. So I'm going to start with that by selecting Select, Color Range, Highlights. And I'm already on that zone right here. So you put right down in here, Highlights. I want my range to be almost all the way up, or if not all the way. And I'm just going to do it, fix my fuzziness until I get those highlights on my face. It's also going to select, as you can see, the rainbows. I'm going to go to Adjustment Layer, Levels, and I'm just going to make it brighter. And as you can see, it really picks up those highlights in my skin for that really sickly look. I'm into it. So on and off, as you can see, it's brightened it up, but it's also brightened up areas that I don't want it to touch, like the rainbows and that big white spot on the wall. It's a little bit too bright for me. So what I'm gonna do is, see on this mask, I'm going to take my brush tool on black 100%, and I'm just gonna brush out the areas that I don't want that layer to touch. Black hides a layer's effect. So as you can see, when I go on here, it's gonna take that right out of the wall. I love that already. It looks way better. I'm gonna take it out from around my head, so it looks a little halo-y. And now I'm just gonna quickly speed up me taking it out of the rainbows. Okay, so now that is done. I really like the way that it turned out after that. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm not a huge fan of the yellowness in the wall here, so I'm gonna go to my Hue and Saturation Adjustment layer, select my slider tool, just click on the spot of the wall of the color that I'm not a fan of. So you see when I click on that, it brings yellow because it's yellow. So I'm gonna pump my saturation just so I can see where it's hitting. So it's hitting some of my face, which is okay because I'd like to get the yellows out of there too. So I'm just gonna bring up the lightness of it, just like that. See how it takes the color out? I'm just gonna put down the saturation a bit as well. And I'm gonna reference my other photo that I'm trying to match to see if the backgrounds are similar. Yep, same color family. I'm pretty happy with that. So again, the same thing happened as like the levels did. This affects places that I don't want it to affect. So I'm quickly going to take my paintbrush into the mask zone here and take it out of the rainbows. Okay, so I'd say that looks pretty good. Definitely happy with that. So the next thing I'm going to do for this image is I'm actually going to do some skin work. I'm just going to take out some blemishes. Some people might go into this a little bit more with skin editing. It's totally up to you, especially if it's a self-portrait like this one is. To do that, I'm going to select my original layer. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to use the clone and the healing brush tool on this new layer instead. So make sure that when you're sampling it from current layer and below, because you want your current layer and the one below it. I do it this way, and I don't do it on the main image because I like to do something called non-destructive editing, which means I won't alter the original image in a way so that if I'm farther down in the editing process, I can still change what I did before, and I don't lose the fact, say if I don't know, clone something in a weird way and I don't notice it until later, and then I have to take this and clone it back. I don't want to do that. I just want to be able to undo it. So I put it on a separate layer. So I'm quickly just going to do a little bit of that skin work, and then I'll be back. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention when I'm doing skin work, when you're sampling from different areas to clone over, make sure you're sampling from places with the same texture. I'll give you an example. I'm going to sample from this part on my forehead that has a lot of grooves in it, and this part that's actually very smooth. If I copy that, those textures don't match, and that's going to look really weird and out of place. So you want to make sure when you're cloning over something, you're sampling from like areas. And don't be afraid to just completely pick a new sample zone every time you stop drawing. Small is better for doing this kind of work. Don't do a huge section, just do a small section. Okay, so I'm totally done with the skin work. I know it doesn't look like I did very much, which I didn't, on and off, here we go. But I'm totally fine with the imperfections in my face for this kind of photography. If I were doing a professional portrait or something for a business or a beauty portrait, then I would probably go into the editing a little bit more. But for this personal style, I'm into it. So the next thing I'm going to do, this is a little bit more skin editing, but it's also enhancing. I'm going to do dodging and burning on my skin. So there's a couple ways that you can do dodging and burning in Photoshop. You can go over here and use the burn and dodge tool right on the image, but again, that would be destructive editing, and I hate doing that. My favorite technique to use is to make a new curves layer, or you can do two levels layers, one with a slightly higher exposure and one with a slightly lower exposure. Mask out both the layers. If you can see here, see this is a little bit lighter. You mask out both the layers and you take a small paintbrush, usually at around 6%, in my opinion. And you just paint. It's basically just painting. Put it on white so you reveal the layer underneath. And you're not really going to be able to see what I'm doing because it's so minimal, but it builds up. It's kind of like painting with a paintbrush. It builds up over time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will be right back. here's a little tip. When you're editing an eye, on the eye whites, always just lighten the bottom, never lighten the top. Sure, you can do it a little bit on the iris. I might even take mine down a little bit. But if you just do it on the bottom, it's gonna look way more natural. A good way to think about dodging and burning is kind of like contouring in makeup. It's the same process. I'm highlighting under my eyes, I'm highlighting under my jawline, on top of the jawline. I'm going to burn my cheekbones a little bit more, side of my nose, underneath my chin, and shape my face. This in particular is called micro and local dodge and burning. Micro being the small brush strokes that I'm making to do small skin edits, like lightening and darkening, just some like spots that I don't like. And then local being large sections. So if I were to take a large brush and maybe give my cheekbone a little bit more there, give it a little bit more there, give it a little bit more there, just like that. So I think that is done. Honestly, I didn't really do much for this one. If I were doing a beauty video, I might be at this computer for like hours doing this. It's insane the amount of editing that you can do by just lightening and darkening the skin. So I'm just gonna put in quickly a small gray layer here so you can kind of see how I did this. You can also see the levels layer that brightened up all those pores on my skin. So this is without the levels layer. This is just the dodging and burning. You can see it's just like small brush strokes. It looks kind of creepy. And then with that levels layer, you can see where the highlights picked up on the skin and where the darkness on my pores are. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do on this image is I want to enhance the red on my face to give me that sick look. I just love looking sick. So I'm gonna do that by doing an adjustment layer again and picking Hue Saturation. I'm gonna use the same tool, it's the slider tool, to pick the red on my face. And I'm gonna just saturate it a little bit. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'm gonna saturate all the way so I can see the reds that I have selected. And I'm actually just gonna take the red. So I'm gonna slide this down just so I pick up, and this is like the purpley reds in my face. That's what I wanna select. So I'm gonna bring that back to normal. I know that I did this. I darkened it a little bit, so I kind of lost a little bit. The reds got darker. Then I up-saturated it a bit. As you can see the difference there, it just kind of darkens it down. Looks kind of creepy. And then I'm just gonna slide it a little bit more over to the purple side of the red. Love it. I think it looks great. Take that out of my DMB, dodge and burn layer group. By the way, all you guys should be labeling your layers to what they are, not just have random hue saturation layers out, but I am crazy and I do this. And it confuses me every time I go back and edit. It's such a rookie mistake that I constantly make. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to desat some of my skin, because right now I've got a lot of red going on my face. I like it, but I want to control it. So I'm going to take my saturation down, or not my saturation, sorry, my vibrance down. And I'm going to reverse the layer mask so that you can't see it. And then I am going to draw it on my skin. I'm just going to go to 100% for now, and then we'll see what it takes. I'm just going to kind of take it off my forehead, take it off the bridge of my nose, leave it on the tips, take it off from under my eyes a bit, but leave it around my eyes for a really weird red eye look.
Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.
Alright, so I'm done with that. As you can see, I just kind of grayed out my skin and left the redness on my cheeks because I want to look sick. And I think it does look sick. So I am done with that as well. So let me see what my previous image looked like, and let me see what this one's like. Okay. So the only thing I have left is color grading, more so. I've already done a lot of color grading here, but I'm gonna go more into it now. So my favorite tool for that is, well, sometimes I go to curves to do color, sometimes I go to hue saturation for more. It's all experimenting, but for this one, I'm gonna use selective color. I love it because you can really fine tune all the colors in your photo. It's super cool. So I guess I'll start with the reds. And I guess I'll fast forward through this unless I have something to explain. But basically what I know I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make the highlights, I'm gonna make them more blue, and I'm probably gonna make the midtones a little bit more blue. I forgot to mention, when you're doing a color layer, I forgot to do it right at the beginning, but change the blending mode to color. That way you don't mess with the darkness and lightness of your photo while you're just trying to adjust things like the color. Okay, so I'm done. I'll click before and after, before, after, before, after. So I know it doesn't look like much of a difference, but it's those fine tuning of details that is gonna make your photos so uniquely yours. As you can see, I had a little bit more of a warmer tone. I brought up the blues, I made the reds a little bit, I put a little bit more yellow into the reds and a little bit more purple as well. I changed the color of the blacks a little bit. They're a little bit more blue now. And yeah, I really like where that is. So I noticed in the image I did before, it was a little bit brighter. This is a different pose, so let it be, but I'll go into my curves layer, to a new curves layer, and I'll just play around a little bit. Curves is my favorite for adjusting anything basically on a photo because you have so much control. The other thing you can do is click on this slider guy, this little finger, and go into zones on your picture, and it will drag up and down, and you can actually, it'll edit that specific lightness, which is really cool, which is super helpful. But curves can also be really complicated, so don't be surprised if it takes you a few tries to get what you want. Okay, so I think that looks really good. One of the things I wanted to do was kind of bring up the reds a little bit more. So I'm gonna do that by going into that hue saturation layer. See, we did non-destructive, so we can go back in there and just adjust it a little bit more. I'm just gonna up the saturation on it, just slightly. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush tool and mask out on my ear, because it's a little bit too red and it's distracting me. Sweet. All right. I think that looks great. The only thing left to do is, well, I would edit out that chair, but I think it looks all right. I think I might tilt it a little bit though. Okay, so here's my final image. I think this looks great. I wouldn't really change anything. So there we have it. I'll show you the before and after. So this is the camera raw image, and this is my after edited image. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys have some good creativity bursts during this crazy time.